Mama. Welcome to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Gibbs, and this podcast exists to help scholarly mamas like you to achieve your life and academic goals without sacrificing what matters most. Here, we're changing the overwhelm, juggle, struggle narrative around what it means to be a mama on an academic journey to one of empowerment, fulfillment, and purposeful success. So how do we successfully navigate these journeys? Well, first, we need the space to embrace this unique blend. Let's begin by saying yes to creating a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside, because that's when we truly become purposefully whole. So get ready for the most non-traditional, unconventional, and revolutionary approach to PhD motherhood, because one thing I have learned over my many years of experience on this journey is that if you want something different, you have to do something different. But you must be brave enough to think differently first. So, Mama, are you in? Fabulous. Let's begin. These are our journeys of becoming. Hey mamas, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time here, first of all, make yourself comfortable, but make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single episode when it drops. Also, if you feel particularly generous today, please do leave a kind review once you finish listening to the episode. It just helps other mamas who may also be on an academic journey to find this podcast, and just benefit from everything that we do here as well. So thank you in advance for that. And thank you so much for being here. Okay. So today you are in for an absolute treat. I've got a special guest here with me today on the show. You may know her from her Instagram or her TikTok or her threads as Research with Lynn. Lynn and I met on Instagram and have been following each other ever since. And I'm so grateful that we've had the opportunity to make this episode happen. We've wanted to do this for quite some time. And I'm just so glad that Lynn is here today and just being able to share this moment with us. Lynn is a mama of one. She's recently had her beautiful daughter. She's a wife. She's a nurse by professional background. And she's also an academic coach and PhD student. She's just coming back to her PhD from a period of maternity leave. So that's what we're going to focus on and chat about today. And I really wanted her to come on here and share her story, share her journey with you, all of you wonderful, lovely listeners, because if you're in this position where you are about to go on maternity leave, or you've just come back from a period of maternity leave, coming back to your PhD, getting back into the swing of things, then this is definitely the episode for you. But just before we get started, here's one fact about Lynn. She was a part of her cheerleading squad in university while she was doing her master's and was a flyer. So if we've got any cheerleading fans listening to this, hey, you've got someone who is also very into cheerleading and is also very good at it. So without further ado, let's get into this amazing episode. I can't wait for you all to hear Lynn's amazing gems. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's get straight in to today's episode. Hi, Lynn. Welcome to the show. Lovely, lovely to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think maybe a good place for us to start will be for you to just tell our listeners about yourself. You could tell us about all the amazing things you've done, but how did you arrive here? How did you get to this point in your journey?
Yeah, well, let's say I'm now a mum of one and
Yay!
Have my kind of academic coaching and sort of career consultancy little thing that I do. But my journey really started in Zimbabwe. That's where I was born. And then I migrated with my family to the UK and I was about 6 years old, did all my schooling in the northwest of England, which was great. But I think something that's worth mentioning is that I had quite a turbulent time, just the normal turbulence associated with being a first generation immigrant, but also, things happening, your family, you're just there and the rest of your extended family is away. And I say that to say that's when I remember being in kind of a sociology, psychology class and thinking, oh, wow, all this feels like it's happening to me, but there are people who've studied this and made me feel less alone. And that's kind of where my interest in the two things that have got me here started, which the first one is research and the other one is kind of sustainable workforce development and initiatives. And yeah, then I went on to study nursing. So I'm a registered nurse and in Canada and in the UK. And then worked as a nurse, and very quickly that little tinkering of, oh, I want to do research, I want to do a PhD was coming back to me. And I remember speaking to people on the wards and they're sort of asking me, like, what do you want to do after this? And say I want to do a PhD, and everybody looking at me like I had six heads. And and yeah, and then I kind of bit the bullet, but I was a bit shy and thought, okay, why don't I do a clinical master's and then I'll still do a bit of research, but I'm too scared to go and do a full PhD or an MRes or an MPhil. So let me do an MSc. So I went, did, a master's, then carried on working, but, I wanted to do something to do with research. And I found myself in a fellowship role with Health Education England. And that was kind of my introduction to the world of research, but at the end part of research, kind of like the dissemination of the research.
Yeah.
So it was this project called the Repair Project, which looked at why do people quit their degrees, essentially? And why don't people, after doing a healthcare degree, find their way into a successful and fulfilling career afterwards? And again, this was my two favorite things: workforce development and the sustainability of it, and research. And I just became more and more interested and more kind of like, this is what I want to do. Then I found myself in higher education, and then ended up meeting my husband, moving to Canada. And here I am in Canada, and used all of that experience to kind of start my own thing.
Oh, wow. It feels like, hold on. It feels like you've like skipped past quite a lot of important things there. So you were a nurse in the UK, then a clinical nurse, and then you went into the Repair Project, which then led you into doing a master's, led you into higher education as a lecturer. And then you just kind of skipped across the pond and went to Canada. So how did that happen?
So I know, and even as you're saying that, I'm like, oh my God, I skipped so much. So when I was in the Repair Project, I was already doing I'd already started my doctorate and I'd already finished my master's. So I essentially, when I was in the working for Health Education England, so they're the people who commission and kind of orchestrate and navigate all the different regulated professions. And I remember being in conversations with, key stakeholders, deans, head of schools. And I was thinking, okay, I'm on this side. I want to get on that side. Like, I want to get into the thick of it in terms of the actual research, the actual teaching. And I remember the head of nursing at a university was like, trying to poach me when I was presenting to her. And I was like, no, not yet. But afterwards, I was like, okay, I really want to get into the thick of it. Even though I was doing my doctorate anyway.
Yeah.
I was doing it as a practitioner researcher at that time. And being in this space, I was like, you know what? I want to get into the higher education space. I was researching from the outside, and I was like, I want to get into researching from the inside. So I actually then crossed over into higher education. And my first role was actually as a senior lecturer and a module leader, because COVID had happened and they had this really exciting module, which was health and safety in care settings. And they needed somebody with clinical currency, essentially, to come and revamp the course, because things to do with PPE, everything had become outdated overnight.
Yeah.
And they needed somebody who was in the thick of, practice to come and revamp it. And that was kind of my segue into higher education.
So exciting. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing and giving that little context so we understand your journey. And I mean, you've had an amazing, diverse career path spanning nursing, spanning academia. Now you've you're pursuing a PhD as a mama. So how do you juggle your roles as a PhD student, as an academic coach, as a digital creator, because we haven't mentioned, but you are very busy on TikTok, and as a new parent, how do you juggle all of these things?
Well, with the putting the new parent in the scenario has definitely put a spanner in the works. But before that, I've always been somebody who's believed in having a portfolio career, even before I understood why it was important. And I think the way that's helped me juggle everything so far was aligning everything, and in order to really give you an example of what I mean by aligning everything, is that at one point I was working as a lecturer. I was still doing a little bit of clinical practice, and I was doing my PhD, and I was like, I want to start a business. And rather than starting a business that's associated with all of those skills and all of those things that I'm doing, I decided to start a product-based business, right? And you can see where this is going, right? I decided to start a product-based business that had nothing to do with anything that I was doing. And it was so misaligned that it was destined for failure. And the moment I realized that it's not about me kind of doing what other people want me to do. It's about me knowing what I'm good at, what I can bring, and then put myself in spaces where people need those services and those skills. And I think aligning what I do, for example, on social media, like what I do on social media is directly associated with my research, with my academic or my clinical background or my research interest. And what I do in terms of the consulting or even coaching is directly related to what I'm doing within my research. So centering myself as the kind of the key person, and then allowing myself to pour into other people, either by educating them, coaching them, or by, that's been, so aligning all of those things as being the only way that I've been able to juggle. Now, let's add motherhood into the picture, because that threw a spanner in the works. That threw a spanner into the works, because I think it made me question, what is all of this for?
That's really deep. And I think as somebody who can relate to everything that you've just said there, as the clinician, as the researcher, as the mama, and starting a business, it really resonates with me what you're saying. And doing that as a parent adds a whole different dimension to what you're doing. In a good way, yes, because it gives you that sense of purpose. It reminds you of why you're doing what you're doing. It situates everything into this bigger picture of what's really important and what really matters. But it does make it a little bit more challenging. So tell me, what has been the most challenging part of this for you?
I think the most challenging is time, but not a lack thereof. But it's been my relationship with time has really been rocked by being a mother, in that while I'm spending time with her physically all the time, mentally, my head can be somewhere else. And I've had to really get to grips with what that looks like, and how intuitive she is when I'm not, when I'm not really spending real time with her. That's been super challenging. And I think, so I'm reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and one thing that he says, or a concept that he's forever talking about, is that no matter how long your life is, so whether I live, 40 years, 100 years, we all actually have the same time, because all we have is the present. The past is gone, and the future is not promised. And there's been times where I'm with her, and I can feel myself sacrificing the present that we have for this unpromised future of getting this PhD, because bottom line, I might not ever finish, not because of anything other than something bad might happen to me, and I might not, and and having to ask myself, is it worth stealing what I have with her right now in order for this PhD that I may or may not get in a couple of years? And it's been a philosophical kind of emotional, thing that I've gone through, and I am going through with her. And it's not as scary and doom and gloom as it sounds, because it has made me very intentional about when she's napping, that to-do list has to be done. And then when I'm with her, we really have to do what mum and daughter have to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that's one of, and I love how you've articulated it into how your relationship with time has evolved as you've become a mum, especially when you're navigating a PhD. Because I think one of the things that we don't realize, or we don't even speak about as scholarly mamas, right? Mamas who are navigating an academic journey, is how we evolve as people from the beginning of this journey. Perhaps some people listening to this may have started their PhD journey not as a mum, and they've become a mum along that way. I started mine as a mum. I finished it as a mum as well. But, I've had 2 kids during my PhD. So I really resonate with that idea of how things change in terms of how you relate to time, becoming so much more intentional, reminding yourself of the gift of the present and being in that moment, whether that is with your little ones, with your spouse and your family, your loved ones, and or maybe even doing the to-do list or the PhD to-do list or whatever. But one of the things that I have kind of accepted, I guess, along my journey has been that it's okay to not be the same person. Like, the evolution of myself has transpired on this journey. So I am not the same person as I was at the very beginning, where perhaps, I was willing to sacrifice certain things, or I may have felt like I had more time than I actually did. Whereas now it's like, no, Michelle, those sacrifices are not worth it. Like, I literally, when I reflect on it, I think, yeah, I'm really proud of the way I navigated this journey. I'm really proud that I didn't sacrifice time with my kids. I didn't sacrifice that present time with them for the sake of my PhD, and, accepted that that's okay. Like, we don't have to be the same person that you were perhaps when you didn't have kids and could put all of your time into all of these big ambitions. It just doesn't work like that when you've got kids. So I know that you've recently returned to your PhD studies after taking an extended maternity break. How did that feel? What was that like, returning to your PhD after maternity?
It was scary. I think the anticipation of returning was so scary because, and this is this relationship with time again. In essence, nothing has changed. When you think about it, nothing has changed. I'm still in the same office that I was before and after the PhD. And I was worried that thing wouldn't switch on. Like, I wouldn't get that leave this space, this kind of purgatory, and go into the now I'm in my PhD kind of head on. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that transfer. But actually, it from the first day, it felt, I don't know, maybe spiritually, I don't know, or intellectually, I felt like, okay, I started. I really, but the anticipation was really scary. And I think, just going back to what you mentioned about, evolving, I think what I was scared most was when I acknowledged that the things that made me super efficient beforehand were absolutely useless for me as a mum. So, for example, I love time blocking. I love using the Pomodoro. That's what I've done all my academic career. They just do not work. I cannot time block with my daughter. It just does not work. And I can't say, okay, I'm going to sit down for 25 minutes and bang this workout. And I just, the fact that I didn't know who that Lynn as a PhD and a mother was, but I know Lynn as a PhD student, but I don't know Lynn as a PhD and a mum. I don't know that woman. I'm getting to know her, but
Yeah.
that was really, really scary. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely hear that. But I love what you said there because yeah, like getting to know this new version of you, because this is a new version of you, right? You're
Yeah.
doing a PhD, the same PhD, yes, but
Yeah.
you're doing this now with new hats on, additional
Yeah.
hats on, additional balls that you're juggling, and getting to know and love this version of you is, I think, one of the biggest secrets to success as a scholarly mama. And what I call it radical acceptance in the sense that you're never going to have the old version. You're never going to have that sense of being in complete control of your time, but it doesn't mean that you cannot create success in this version of yourself. Like, this version of yourself has equal opportunity to create that success. It just looks different. You know, the day-to-day just looks different. And it's so interesting what you said about these techniques and how, you know, you don't have that full control over your time, and how maybe perhaps before you felt that sense of control. Just wondering what practical strategies you have used or intend to use to reintegrate yourself into PhD life and get back up to speed with your research after maternity leave.
I think sitting down and having a really back to basics conversation about why I'm doing this, you know, who is it for? What is it for? Especially because of all the different changes that have happened in my personal and professional life. For example, when I was an insider researcher, when I first kind of came up with the concept of this, and now I'm on the outside. And what does that change in terms of my research? Literally going back to, you know, questions, objectives, and all of that. And also, who is this for? What's the so what? Has that changed? And that has really led me to kind of get up to date with the literature as well in that more practical sense, because that can be overwhelming. You know, how do you see what the updates have been since you've been away? But like getting back and narrowing, like, what is this for, really is helped me to navigate the literature again. And then asking for help in a way that I've never had the privilege to do previously. And so I've never really been comfortable with. So during my academic career previously, it has just been me, you know, academia, higher education, and education in general has been a clutch for me, and a stable entity where others might have their family there. So I've never been able to ask for help when it comes, you know, when it comes to that. But now I have my in-laws, and they have been like a massive rock in terms of, I feel like I'm in school again. You know, in terms of they come and they cook, they do everything just so I can study, and being comfortable and to ask for that help and say, you know, I'm vulnerable. We're vulnerable because I'm absent because of this commitment I've made. Can you come and help me? That has been that has been like, I can't stress enough, you know. I don't know whether I know my in-laws are never going to watch this, but I'm so grateful for them as and their support in this, right. But in terms of practically, I'm having to use more of my hours than I would like. I'm an early bird, but I'm having to, once everybody's gone to bed, I'm having to use those hours to really catch up. And also early morning rising. So lucky for me, my time zone wise, because my PhD is still in the UK and I'm in Canada. And also most of my clients are in the UK and I'm in Canada. So I tend to schedule meetings at like 5 o'clock in the morning. That's my time. And drink lots of water so I don't have a hoarse voice and it doesn't give it away. And that has really helped me because I get to, you know, have my client meetings. I get to have my supervision meetings or anything like that first thing in the morning while everybody's still asleep. And then I have the rest of the day for my other very important responsibilities.
That is awesome. And, you know, going back to the idea of being able to ask for help. Oh, on one hand, I think that's a real struggle for us as scholarly mamas. It's a real struggle because, you know, when you are doing a PhD as a mama, you really have to get out of this superwoman mindset that you could do everything. You're the most amazing thing. You could change the world. Like there's nothing going to stop you. And while that motivation is great,
Yeah.
we all know that, you know, we need to be very mindful that we're not stretching ourselves too far, too much, and that we are seeking and accepting the help available. And so I'm so happy for you that you've had that support in your in-laws, the practical support, right? Because obviously they're not going to help you do your PhD, but that practical support that enables and empowers you to be able to go after your dreams and make them happen. So I think that is so amazing. You've got that support. So just thinking about the idea of coming back to the PhD, and I know in academia, a lot of PhD students may worry about losing momentum in their studies when they're taking a break. You know, people don't even want to take a weekend off, much less, you know, a maternity leave. Is that something that worried you at all? And if it did worry you, why did it worry you? If it didn't worry you, why not?
So I think initially when I thought about taking a break, so when I decided to take a break, because initially I was like, I'm going to quit. It was the hormones, right? So initially when I was pregnant, I thought like I was going to quit. And then when I finally decided, and my husband convinced me, take a break. And then after the break, you can make a decision. At that point, I was so worried about losing momentum. And that was one of the things but I think it's because I had fought so hard not to take a break. But while fighting so hard not to take a break on paper, I was taking a break because I wasn't doing anything. Like I had a whole 6 months of being, sick, tired during like early pregnancy where I wasn't doing anything. But because I wasn't taking a break on paper and I was, expending so much energy thinking about it, persecuting myself, I felt like I was doing something. So when I finally took the break, that was great. But when I came back, when I realized, I sat down with myself and I said, okay, what is this all for? And we all work because, it's to make our, family better and my daughter, all this. I realized, okay, the best thing I can do is increase momentum in order for this to be finished. That's the best thing I can do for my daughter right now. And the best thing I can do for me. I cannot stretch this out any longer than it needs to be. And so I think that gave me a lot of momentum. Also, I think I think momentum is almost the wrong word in that. Momentum suggests that I'm staying on the same path and it's going quicker, right? And it's going quicker or it's going. I think actually coming back to this being a parent moved me onto a different conveyor belt in that the type of advice that I was getting before just doesn't fit. I need to be on a different conveyor belt that in itself, that conveyor belt has a different momentum. So that's where I found so much joy, peace, validation in spaces like your podcast, following people who became parents, during this. So so my problem, I think my problem wasn't momentum. If I tried to come back and stay on the same track, the same road, I needed to change road altogether and go with the flow of that road.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes. And this is, oh my goodness. Yes. This is the whole point, Lynn. Like seriously, this is the whole point, that when we are comparing ourselves as mamas, quite often we are comparing ourselves to people who do not have the same responsibilities that we have, who are on a different conveyor belt, who are on a different path, who are going at some other velocity than us. And we sit in our state of comparison and we say, oh, maybe this isn't going to work out for me because look, all of these other people have finished. Everybody else is kind of graduating and moving on and I am still here. Or, look, everybody else is kind of submitting their thesis and I haven't finished chapter XYZ. And we just are so unkind to ourselves in our thoughts, in our self-talk. And I think what you said there is so true, that we need to get off of this comparison train that we're on, recognize that we're on a completely different path, that we are on a different conveyor belt. It's almost like being at the airport and looking for your luggage on the wrong conveyor belt. It's not there because you are on a different conveyor belt. So Absolutely. Go over to your conveyor belt and look for your luggage there. So yeah, I think that really summarizes for me what I've had to accept, and what I hope people listening to this accept as well. And not accept in a way like, oh, not as good as, accept in a way that we are just on a different path. It is not a worse path. It is not a better path. It is the path that is for us. And it's the path that works for our situation. And that's okay.
Absolutely. Honestly, absolutely. I think there was a recent conversation, sorry to go a bit off track, and it just fits quite nicely with this. There was a recent conversation, and there's always this type of discourse that happens where people are not, people have, let's say, a problem with individuals or people who decide to take their academic knowledge or this academic services that they provide and monetize them themselves, right? So
yeah.
And sometimes people get discouraged when they hear people, criticize them. But you've got to gain perspective, because PhD students come in all different shapes and sizes. There are some people who are PhD students and are academics, but they're not academics because they're PhD students. They would have been academics anyway because of their professional experience. And then there are some people who are, doing their PhD in order to become academics. And the way that people who are doing their PhD in order to become academics feel about what their PhD can do for them is very different to people who are already academics in their own right before the PhD. And sometimes it's very, very important to know exactly what and who you are so that you know what applies to you. Because honestly, yes, not everything applies to you in terms of people's criticisms, in terms of people's advice, in terms of people's, why are you doing that? Because, and I say this to empower each and every one of us. And this is a conversation I have often with the people that I coach who are wanting to leave academia or who are wanting to leave, let's say, clinical practice and start their own thing. And it's a reminder to say that the power is really in your hands. There is a reason why institutions are advertising these jobs with the skills that you have. It's because the skills that you have are valuable, and it's not for anybody to tell you how you use those skills, but you need to know what you are as a package before you're pulled from pillar to post.
Yes. And that reminds me of a conversation I had with Dr. Gertrude Nontera a couple of episodes ago. And she was talking about the importance of building a personal brand and basically looking past all the titles and the prestige in the titles and focusing on the skills that you have developed, focusing on your own journey and deciding where you want that to take you. And that differs for everybody. Like, it's so individual, but we seem to get into this trap where we think that everybody's path needs to be the same and the purpose of that PhD is the same for everyone. And like you rightfully said, it's not. The purpose of the PhD is different for everybody doing a PhD. They're doing it for different reasons. And we have no say, or we shouldn't even have an opinion about what somebody's PhD represents for them, because that's so individual. The journey is individual, but also the purpose and what it means for them is also different. And how we choose to utilize and apply those skills can also be different. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think the issue comes where people seem to think that there's this fixed trajectory that everybody in academia needs to follow, that everybody doing a PhD needs to follow. And that's simply not the case. It simply is not the case. So I'm just wondering about, Looking back, do you feel that the maternity break benefited your PhD in any unexpected ways? Things that you didn't expect were going to be bonus points, I guess, of this break? And has it influenced your approach to work-life harmony in academia?
Yes. So two things. I think the first is that I had to acknowledge that I was intellectually and theoretically immature. So even though I took this time off to be, because I was sick with being pregnant and I needed maternity, I also had to acknowledge that I think intellectually I needed this year. I needed this year intellectually to catch up to some of the theoretical weaknesses that I had in my PhD. And it's not that so I'm using critical realism in my PhD, and intuitively I knew my question needed that theoretical framework, but I didn't know of critical realism to the extent that I know of it now. And I needed this time to put my intuition into something that I can cite and I can articulate to other academics, and they can understand why my question maybe seems so simple at the forefront. And so although, I thank my daughter for coming at this time where I needed time to grow intellectually. So I feel like I have grown in that respect. The second thing is that it was actually during my maternity leave where I decided to start my coaching and consulting business. And I've never had in my whole time, I've never had the luxury of having time off where I didn't feel guilty, guilt-free time off to do things that I've always wanted to do, right? And one of the things I always wanted to do was create digital solutions for problems that I know people are facing. And us as people who've gotten over those hurdles, we kind of hoard that tacit knowledge of how to overcome those things, and we hoard it and let people scramble, because we don't have time, right? You finish your PhD and very quickly you're onto something else. You don't have time to put all those learnings that aren't written anywhere into writing for the people behind you. And I had this 9 months or a year to do that. So that really benefited, and it meant that I was able to do it in such a way that I no longer need to leave the house in order to make money, or in order to use my gifts, my talents, my teaching, be able to serve students. I no longer need to leave the house to do that. And so that's allowed me to harmonize my PhD, and then my work-life balance. And that was all because of maternity leave. So anybody listening and you have this idea of, I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to create this little thing. I've always wanted to create a little coloring book with all the theorists in psychology. I don't know, right? And you get pregnant, use that time to do that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that I did that as well. Like I published our children's books during my maternity leave and started my blog during that time. And I think you're right. I think it's a creative energy that prior to that break, you don't have anywhere to put it. There's no outlet for that creative energy. And like you said, having the desire to serve and support people who are a few steps behind you, who are navigating these problems and experiencing these challenges and looking for solutions. And you never really have the space to be able to create those, even though you yourself have experienced exactly that. You never have the space and time to be able to put that into something, turn that into something. And I think with the maternity leave, it doesn't feel as taxing because you're not adding to an already complicated, busy, packed schedule. You've got that break from work, you've got that break from your PhD, you're looking after your little one, and you're trying to do something meaningful on top of that for that creative energy that you've got. So I think I relate to that as well. And I'm so grateful that I had those opportunities and those breaks to be able to do something with my creative energy as well. And I love that you've done exactly the same thing, and it's turned out to be not just a creative outlet for you, but also a source of income that you can use to support your family. I think is just amazing. So well done. So there may be people listening to this who are, contemplating taking an extended leave for whatever reason, maybe family reasons or maternity as well, or who are about to return after a break. What advice would you give to those PhD mamas?
I would say, yeah, take your break, but definitely find a way to keep connected to, some part of your PhD. Find and try and refine the purpose of maybe why you're doing all of this. Whether that's, so one of the things for me was getting a healthy interest into understanding critical realism and the people that surround critical realism. So that's how I remained connected. Equally, I remained connected by helping other people with their masters and their BSc as well. But I enjoy that. And that was part of my kind of like service and making videos about research but I didn't do anything to do with the context of the PhD at all, but I stayed connected in that way. I think also social media is very helpful, coming into spaces like this that are a little bit peripheral, but are integral to your wellness as a researcher and as a PhD or an academic. So I think remaining connected in some way that still allows you to take a break.
Yeah, really, really good advice. And I think one of the biggest challenges, especially as mamas, is that feeling isolated. And especially if you're taking a break for, maternity break or another kind of family related break, and you're not connecting with your peers or your colleagues, it can feel really isolating. And like you said, that's a time to stay connected, whether that's through reading or social media or joining a community of people who are navigating this journey, just staying connected with others who can, support you through this transition, this period of change that you're going through. Because obviously, coming back to the PhD after a break is a period of transition. And sometimes that can be really hard when you're doing it by yourself. So staying connected, whether that's to the literature, via social media, or being a part of a community, is so helpful to just make it a little bit easier. So I know you talked about having family support, in-laws really being supportive and helping you through this period of adjustment. So what support systems or resources have you found most valuable in your journey as a new mama who's also doing a PhD? And are there any that you wish were more readily available?
I think the best has been online communities and online resources. And I've mentioned before, and I'm not joking, your podcast, the guests that you have on, in that, we would never know, a lot of these people, we would never know their journey, would never know how they got to where they are. We just see them, at destination. And it's nice that there's places like here where you can, come and see how people are getting there and realize that people are having the same thoughts as you. And TikTok has been great. People coming, doing lives, people who are ahead, who are, ahead. And then you're like, wow, these, amazing people. And then they start to tell you, well, it took me this long, I did this. And just something that, an example is, I remember you had a guest on a couple of episodes ago who was talking about actually leaving the family and going to do work elsewhere.
Yeah.
And just after that, I also heard there's somebody I follow, Dr. Noni, who was talking about how she would leave baby and dad and go and do work, which was something that I needed to hear, because this was almost like what I felt was an intrusive thought I kept getting about, Lynn, you just need to take, go somewhere. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, abandoning your children. I was like, oh, I was getting all these thoughts. So to hear other people and go, oh my goodness, this is a very normal thought. This is not an intrusive thought, Lynn. Like, you don't need to
Yes.
silence it. You need to maybe bring it up to your husband. And it's having these spaces, because it's new, right? I've just switched to this road. I've just switched to this conveyor. I don't know what's normal. So I don't know if this is an intrusive thought or this is a very normal. So having these, going into these spaces that initially don't seem like they have anything really to do with what is it that, and seeing how people got to where they are and validating me in my intrusive thoughts.
Oh, I love that. And, I'm happy that you found that space, that safe space to feel that sense of belonging and feel a sense that, I'm not alone in this. There are other people who are navigating this journey. And one of the things I love about what you said, which I've never thought about, is really getting that inside scoop into the journey. So a lot of times, like you said, on social media, maybe in your university, you're seeing people celebrating those successes. Oh yes, I finished, I've got this award, that award, this publication, that publication. But actually nobody's talking about what it took to get there. And unfortunately, sometimes what sacrifices were made to get there, and also to kind of normalize the fact that we are living whole lives, right, outside of these academic journeys. We are moms. Some people are caring for older parents. People are going through all kinds of things, and actually being able to coming to a space where it's okay to be living a multidimensional life, wearing many hats, juggling it all, and trying to, stay afloat of all of it, and learning ways of how to do that well without, burning yourself out, getting yourself sick, being able to do that with, without shame, without guilt, and without shame, I think is really important. So the fact that you found that solace in hearing the stories of others, it really just makes my heart smile, because it makes me think, yeah, Michelle, this is actually what people need. They need to hear the stories of other people who have achieved that success and hear how they've done it and see what they can learn from that other person sharing their story. So important. And that's why you are here. Hello. That's why you're here as well, to share your story and to let people know, look at what Lynn's doing. She's juggling so many things, but there's purpose behind what she's doing. And maybe there's some things I can learn from listening to her. So I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. I actually wanted to ask you, before I move on to the next question I had on my list, I wanted to go back to one that I didn't ask. And that was, did you find that your perspective on your research topic itself, so now the actual PhD, or even your approach to it, how has that changed after becoming a mother and taking a break?
I think I've been now I've come back with a bit more, I'm a bit more pragmatic, and really going back to basics with regards to what is this for? And I don't mean from me personally, but for when I think about the contribution to knowledge and the contribution to even to practice and theory, I just feel that I have a little bit more clarity. I don't know. There's a certain amount of minimizing of the PhD that I've done that has helped me to see my topic more clearly. I think before, when it was the biggest thing and the most important thing in my life, it was almost all consuming and I couldn't see the wood for the trees. But now I feel like I'm almost like I've minimized this. I had to minimize its importance to some extent, or put it relative to everything else, which has allowed me to see a bit more, to focus like a camera. So now I can focus and see things more clearly. So now when I've sat down with my supervisors, I've articulated my topic, what I'm going to do, it's just felt more clear. But I don't know, maybe it's that kind of intellectual, the maturity that I needed. But I do think putting it into perspective in the grand scheme of things has helped me see more clearly.
Oh, I love that gem. That is a gem. That is a gem, Lynn. The fact that when this PhD was the be all and end all for you, it almost was so all consuming and so like, all encompassing that you felt less clear about what it is you were even doing in the first place with the PhD. Now that you have been able to have that new perspective on this, becoming a mama and juggling so many other hats and realizing that the PhD is part of your journey, it's not your entire journey in itself, has given you clarity, has given it perspective, has given it a place in your life, and not this kind of, the PhD is everything, that's all I am. And I think, like you said, that emotional, intellectual maturity, and gosh, I had a thought and it's running away from me now, but almost like this identity shift, right? Because before, maybe the PhD was very closely linked to your identity. You can correct me if I'm wrong, because I definitely felt that. I felt like it was like, who am I? PhD student. What am I here for? To do my PhD. It was like so connected to who I was, until you kind of remind yourself, this PhD is just part of my journey. I'm so much more than this. And it's important and it has its place. Of course it has its place, because as you mentioned, the contribution to research, the contribution to knowledge, the patients that will benefit from this work later on, like there is a purpose here, right? But it has a place. It has its own place, and it's not everything. It's not the be all and end all.
I completely agree. And it's just reminded me of something that I learned at the start of my doctoral journey from one of my advisors, she's fantastic. And it always stays with me. And it's about Sean and practitioner research about, when you are in the swampy lowlands, you can't see what's going on, but the people in the high grounds can see clearly what the problems are. But when you are in it, you can't see that, past that tree is your destination, but the people at the top go, oh, it's just there. And I feel that the clarity has been me kind of moving so away from it and just going up, a high ground a little bit. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is not really that bad. This isn't the beast that I've been making it.
Oh my goodness. You have no idea what I'm about to share with you. And this was not part of the plan for today's episode or anything, but I feel like I have to share it because I have been planning another episode, and what you've just said there has completely, it's almost like you were in my head. So basically what I have been seeing quite a lot, and I'm still going to share this episode, but I'm going to share it now as well. What I've been seeing a lot on social media is a lot about the costs, the sacrifices that we have to make to do our PhDs, all the things that we're juggling, and how we've got to say no to so many, family and friends and connections and having fun and all that stuff. So because we've got this PhD, and what comes to mind when I hear people say that is we recently went to Barbados on holiday over the summer, and we went to something called Animal Flora Cave, and you go into this cave and it's very dark, it's very wet. And if you just focus on, because, the rocks are really slippery, so you've got to be very careful as you're walking through this cave. So you're looking down, you're focusing on the rocks. And when you're doing that, it's dark. It's dark in the cave. Like all you can see is darkness. But when you raise your head up and look up, as if you are in a tunnel, you can see the light. You can see the light, and you can see, oh, this cave is not so dark after all. There's actually light coming into this cave. And when I had that experience, it felt very metaphorical to me, because it felt like when you're on a PhD journey as a mama, it feels dark, it feels lonely, it feels like you're in this dark tunnel that has no end to it. It's all consuming. The darkness is literally all around you. But what I realized from being in that cave is you only can see the light when you look up. You've got to look up in order to see the light. You've got to raise your head from focusing on the things that are keeping you stuck, keeping you buried, keeping you down. Raise your head and look up, and that's when you can see the light. So if you're in a tunnel, you can begin to see your way out of this. You can begin to see that there's light at the end of this tunnel, but you cannot see that when you are buried into this PhD so deep that it's all consuming, it's all encompassing, it's just bringing so much darkness and so much sacrifice. Whereas when you look up and you look around and you look at the things that bring meaning to your life and you look at the impact that you're going to have through this work and you give it that perspective, you can see the light. You can see that actually this is possible for me. I can get through this, but I'm not going to get through it if all I do is look down.
I mean, that is so powerful. That is so powerful. And I feel I'm doing a disservice adding one thing, but one thing I do want to add is that honestly, with all of that, and also what you do, Dr. Gibbs, by providing other people's stories here, it allows people like me to look up and look at people who've completed and go, oh, okay, yeah, and that's how I feel in terms of this space that you've created. Exactly.
Oh, thank you so much. That really warms my heart. But you have got a lot to give as well. And you have navigated your PhD journey as well as moving countries, which is huge. As I said at the beginning, you kind of skipped over it, but that's a huge thing, right? Among all the other transitions. So what advice would you give to other mamas who are on a PhD journey and thinking about making a big change, moving somewhere new or moving abroad? What would you advise them to do?
I think being clear about what it is that you want out of life, being clear about what it is that skills that you have. I think, in life in general, it's important to know who you are, and then nobody can then tell you what you can and cannot do. I think often, especially us who've been through the ins and outs of higher education, we are indoctrinated, and that's okay. But there, institutions and everybody benefits from us not knowing our worth. They benefit from us feeling like, nervous about starting my own thing, even though the things that would help you start your own things are the same things that they're advertising by the tens for. You know what I mean? So you've got to think to yourself, if you go and look at how your skills are packaged as, senior lecturer or as module leader, and how they're advertised by these institutions, what's stopping you from advertising those things? And I say that to say that sometimes, and this is where this kind of social construction of things, a lot of these barriers when we're transferring our skills abroad or transferring into a new sector are constructs. So they're not physical barriers, but they are constructs of the mind. And there's a big mindset shift that you have to do when you move countries, because, you go through all these processes of credentialing and all of this. And there's a lot of no's that people tell you. Oh, you don't quite fit into this box. You don't quite fit into that box. You don't quite fit into this box. But these are boxes that they've constructed. And I think you have to be very, very, very sure of yourself of like, I have these skills and these skills are valuable. If they don't fit into your box in a way that serves me and my family, I'm just going to create my own box, and you've got to be confident in doing that. And I think, so even doing a sit down of saying, okay, what am I good at? When I apply for jobs, what is it that they want from me? And honing in on those skills. So I can give you an example. So one of the reasons that I've been hired is people seem to like the way that I speak and solve problems by talking. So people seem to like that. And I say it like that because that's what it is, whether I'm teaching, whether I'm working clinically, whether when I worked at HE, whether, or when I'm here with you. So that seems to be something that other people value. So I need to value it. And as a result of that, I've started doing public speaking training and going into events where people talk, because I'm not waiting for an institution to tell me that I need to foster that. I'm the institution. I have to do that for myself. So I think you'll come up with a lot of no's when you try and shift from academia to industry, or from, Canada to the UK to the Canada. But just do never forget that institutions and places are empty shells for you to go with your skills. And if and don't let anybody trick you into to thinking that you're not valuable without the institution. And that all starts with you knowing what you are and what you have, and really, really being able to present that, and being confident in that.
Oh gosh, Lynn, like, you're dropping so many gems today. I love that, because I think that is, even for myself, I've had to go through that exact process of what you're saying, and it's really hard. It's really hard when you're introverted and you don't have this exuberant confidence. It is really difficult. And I think what you've just suggested, that advice, is so powerful. It's speaking to me, and I'm sure it's speaking to everybody listening to this, that we need to value what we offer, what we bring to the table, and to focus on the skills that you've got, not the titles you've had, but the skills that you bring, and focus on how transferable those are, whether that's to an industry role, an academic role, a clinical role, entrepreneurial venture. But really honing in those skills is so important for us as scholarly mamas, and we should be confident in those skills. So I think that advice is so pertinent, especially for anybody who is nearing the end of their PhD and looking for the next role, or looking to move abroad. Really reducing things to skills. I feel like as academics, we focus a lot on the prestige, the titles, all those things. And really what we need to do is come back to the basics. What are the skills that you have that people value in your job, or in, your research journey? What are the skills, and how can you utilize those skills to the benefit of other people, whether that's in an employee capacity, or whether that's in an entrepreneurial capacity? So key. I think this is like our last question now, but now that you have had your first taste of motherhood, right? What advice would you give to other mamas who are considering pursuing a doctorate, or, and doing so while also raising a family?
I would say do it. There are certainly no regrets. And from everybody who I've spoken to, you find ways around it. You become more creative. You make sacrifices. You learn new skills. You're forced to think outside of the box. Had I not had my daughter, I would have never fully jumped into starting my own thing. I would have always self-sabotaged. I would have, because I it's something I've been doing a little bit, but it was her that made me go, now or never, so I think do it. And it's scary because you're not going to know the person that you become, but it's exciting. She's not going to be that bad, I promise.
You're so right. You're so right. That is so true. You mentioned earlier about your academic coaching business, and obviously your TikTok and all these things. Talk to us. Tell us more about where people can find you online and what services you offer.
Yeah, so you can find me on TikTok and Threads, and it's Research with Lynn. I'm definitely much more real time there. In terms of the services I offer, it's two things. I support undergraduate and master's students with academic coaching. And it's funny because people think it's something to do with the research. It is, there's that element of it, but honestly, most of it is pastoral care, motivation, procrastination, and people who everything is riding on them finishing, because I've been there. I've been at a point where I'm like, okay, I need to finish university because I don't like my situation. And, university is a vehicle for me to be emancipated from these things that I feel I'm going through. So I have a real sense of duty to be there for people who have additional learning needs, but really it's more responsibilities that are going to cause them to not finish at the last hurdle. So that's one part of it. But the kind of really exciting thing is I support people transitioning from when they've decided, you know what, I want to do something for myself. I want to start my own coaching business. I want to start my own academic consulting. I want to start, and I help them leverage social media and market and go through that in the most authentic way. And again, most people think it's the doing. It's not. A lot of it's mindset stuff that we do. And yeah, so if you want to find me, research with Lynn on all platforms, but TikTok and Threads are the best places.
Awesome. I love your threads, by the way. So if you definitely want to get into a conversation with Lynn, definitely check her out on Threads. And also, like you said, TikTok, obviously you've got the video element there. So, and you are awesome on TikTok. So please do check her out. But goodness, thank you so much for being here, Lynn. It has been an absolute pleasure. We wanted to do this for quite some time. So I'm happy that we've made it happen. And it's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
No, thank you for having me. We've been following each other's journeys for a long time, and yeah, thank you for the work that you do. You are providing a service like no other. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and if you did and you want in on this movement, please head over to mrsmummyphd.com or scholarlymamas.com. If you want to do your PhD well without sacrificing yourself or those you love dearest, then you need your hands on my free training called the PhD with Purpose Webinar. When you join us inside Scholarly Mamas Explore, you'll get access to this free training and so much more. Remember, Mama, these are our journeys of becoming.